Okay. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Max Costin. I'm the co-director of March for Our Lives San Diego. And I'm joined by my co-host, Natalie Goldwasser, who is our political director. We also have Meg Thode, who is a representative from the League of Women Voters San Diego, and one of our panelist speakers, along with the Registrar of Voters, the San Diego County Registrar of Voters, Michael Vu. So welcome, Meg and Michael, and thank you so much for coming and being here.
Wonderful
Thank
to
you,
be
Max.
here. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, we'd just like to start off by thanking everyone in our audience, and thank you everyone who's watching this. We all know that this election is really critical to everyone. So this is why March for Our Lives San Diego has decided to put on this event. We wish it could be an actual meeting around a round table where we discuss everything, but because of COVID-19, we believe it is just the safest to make sure that we do this meeting virtually so we can keep everyone safe. So with that said, we all know that this election is going to be very different. First of all, with just the executive order from the governor making it that every registered voter gets a mail-in ballot. So with that said, let's get started. And Mr. Vu, do you want to start with your presentation?
I'd be more than happy to, Max. Let me go ahead and move to share it.
Awesome.
So let me just first off by saying that it's such a pleasure to be able to be invited to really talk with a group like yours, Max, for March for Our Lives, and really talk about the upcoming election, because you absolutely hit it right on the nail on the head, which is there's so many different confluences of events that's happening in our country these days, whether it's in California, whether it's wildfires that we have to be concerned about, whether it's the fact that a Supreme Court justice has passed away, and how that dynamic is playing out throughout the entire country, as well as here in our state, as well as here in our county. Certainly, you've got the pandemic itself, which I'll go into in quite a bit of detail. And then that's not even counting on the discussing the fact that we're doing it all under the pandemic, as well as the under a presidential election. So there's a lot going on in terms of our preparations here at the Register of Voters office. And I really want to get into how we got to this place in time, this point in time where now we're 26 days, less than 26 days, if you will, before we conduct the November 3rd election. I recently heard someone say that October is the new November. And they are absolutely correct on that, is that the election has already started. We're not really waiting for November 3rd. Yes, that is going to be a significant date. There will be a lot of people that will turn out on that respective date, but there are going to be many more that can turn out well before that. And the reason why is because we've already started the voting process here in our state. And in our county, we've sent out over 1.9 million registered voters that are out there. But how do we get to this point in time where we're having to conduct this presidential election? And I won't go into all the respective confluences of events that has just transpired, but more along the lines of how we've now had to respond to this pandemic. And Max, you've talked about one of those aspects is that every active registered voter in our state will be receiving a mail ballot. It is going to be the largest mail ballot election that we've ever conducted in the state and in our county in historic numbers. And I will get to that in just a split second. But as many of you may recall that are listening in, is that really the election of the March presidential primary election, weren't really impacted and affected by the pandemic. Registered voters at that time, we were sitting around 1.85 million, 1.86 million registered voters at that respective time. And we had 1,548 voting precincts, neighborhood precincts, and we had around 7,000 to 8,000 poll workers that assisted and volunteered them to be a poll worker for election day, the one day, that 13-hour period. individuals were trained that volunteered their respective time. And we conducted where voters were able to either cast the mail ballot in advance, because in our county, a lot of voters are already signed up to be a permanent mail ballot voter. And I'll talk about those percentages in a little bit. But voters that wanted to go to a polling place could go to one of 1,548 sites to go and cast their respective ballots on election day. But shortly after that election, on March, I believe, 19th, the first executive order, or the executive order, came down from the governor saying that individuals that were not essential workers should shelter at home. Well, we had just conducted the March 3rd election, and we were in the middle of certifying that election, which many of you know is that we get a 30-day period to ensure that we're counting every single validly cast and timely cast ballot. And so we were in the throes of that period of time, and we could not shelter at home. We were essential workers. We were part of the 2016, after the 2016 election was deemed a critical infrastructure of the country. And so we had to remain here and be able to certify a presidential primary election and do it accurately, but also do it under the cloud of a pandemic. And voters really didn't get to see that picture of it. They were, of course, sheltering at home, probably trying to figure out where they were going to get paper towels and toilet paper and hand sanitizing wipes and all the other sundries of things that we now know are part of keeping us all safe. But our office remained here, and we were working weekends and evenings to make sure that everyone's votes were going to be counted, that were validly cast. And so how do you go from a staff of 65 full-time employees, and that's the total number of people that we have, and then we always balloon up to conduct an election of that magnitude and size of number of registered voters that we have. We need around 1,200 individuals to volunteer as a seasonal capacity. So as you can imagine, to having 1,200 plus the 65 full-time employees that we have inside our building, and the requirement for social distancing was just never going to work. And so we had to really scramble to figure out how were we going to be able to ensure social distancing, and really had to look really hard. So our office was really impacted. Now, the governor issued an executive order extending the certification period. We really didn't need it because we were in a good position, and we're in a good position because a lot of these ballots that we had to process were mail ballots, and we were strongly suited and well prepared to tackle the issue of the total quantities and the volumes that we are now talking about on a national scale, whether or not entities like the U.S. Postal Service or my colleagues in other parts of the country, which are not heavy in voting by mail, could manage an election under the cloud of the pandemic. For us, we were strong in that area because we have been preparing for decades, and our preparation is really in alignment with how voters behaving and what their preferences have been. And what their preferences have been is wanting to vote by mail. And so our increase of voting by mail here in our county has grown over 600% from 2004 to now, where you've had 600% of increase of our voters wanting to cast a mail ballot, but not only just cast a mail ballot in one election, but permanently in any election that pertains to them. So that's where this comes into play here is that really it occurs in March, and the framework of the decision making here in our county somewhat is expressed in this way. So shortly after the March election, we had it all shelter home. We were still here, but also to try to certify the election. But at that exact same time, the state recognized that there had to be we still had to start conversations about the November election. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about that. The state knew that local elections officials needed as much time to figure this all out, because you do not prepare a major election as we're going to be conducting with the highest turnout that we have in a 4-year cycle, if not the highest turnout, because of all these confluences of events that are going to occur, that has occurred, now resting and roosting on by the time the November election comes around. So they knew that they needed to form a group of individuals. A task force was formed. I was included in that task force along with my colleagues in other counties, as well as representatives from the state legislature and the governor's office, as well as various advocacy groups that were out there. And there were a number of conversations about how the November election was going to be conducted. Ultimately, for me, I was happy and proud of the fact that everyone knew that regardless of the differences, is that we needed to come together and the decisions needed to be made decisively and quickly. Now, there were definitely debates that were going back and forth about how the election should have been conducted, but I was really happy that the governor, regardless of my opinions about whether or not I agreed at the end of it all about what the final policies were, what I appreciated the most was that quick action and decisive action was had, because from my perspective, I needed every single moment of time to be able to prepare for the November election. And the team of register of voters here preparing for it as well. And not just the team, but voters as well. And so that's where I'm coming from in my presentation is that really, ultimately, we've got to tackle the pandemic. We have to respond to the pandemic, but we need to make sure that all voters are informed about what these changes are going to occur. So I'm hoping you can see the slide deck here, but let me kind of give you the characteristics of the election as it's going to unfold. We're now at over 1.9 million registered voters. We've crested over that most recently. We were at 1.5 million in March, and now we're over 1.9 million registered voters. This is actually old information. We're now at like 1.91 million registered voters, and it keeps on growing out there. And if you think about 2016's election, and now we have over 250,000 more new registrants on our voter registration file than we did back in 2016. So we're in really a historic numbers in terms of our voter population here in San Diego County in terms of the total number of people registered vote. We're going to be sending over 2 million sample ballot and voter information pamphlets. And why are we sending more pamphlets than we do registered voters is because we also provide the pamphlets in 4 federally covered languages: Spanish, Filipino, Vietnamese, and Chinese. Know that whenever we conduct an election, we conduct that election not just in English, but we have to meet our Federal Voting Rights Act obligations, which were covered for those languages that I just referred to. So how many poll workers, how many seasonal workers are we going to have? Well, we were anticipating we were going to need about 9,000 volunteer poll workers. But in this upcoming election, all told, with the 1,200, around 1,000, plus the staff, plus the poll workers, we're going to need around 4,500 to 4,600 seasonal staff members. Now, there is a difference between a volunteer poll worker and now seasonal staff, because that's one of the biggest shifts that we're having to make is to provide certainty. We are paying every single one of our poll workers, not a volunteer stipend, but now paying them an hourly wage as we proceed with the election, so we can build to certainty. And because of elections is date certain, we can talk about postponing primary elections. We can talk about postponing the Olympics. We can talk about postponing the census. One thing we're not postponing, though, by any means, is this November 3rd election. It's going to happen. So military and overseas voters, we've already sent out 14,000 military overseas voters their ballots back on September 18th and 19th. Most voters that are living in San Diego started receiving their ballots on Monday. Just know, though, that the elections started beginning for voters for them to be able to cast a ballot back on September 18th and 19th, where our military or overseas voters, we have to mail them their respective ballots by federal law. Languages that we support, I gave you 4 beyond just English that we are covered under the Federal Voting Rights Act. Well, you've got a California version of the Voting Rights Act. And so they have their specific thresholds. And in specific areas within the county, we have to provide services in Laotian, Japanese, Korean, and Arabic as well. So that's where you get the 9 languages. When you think about the county, we have 196 contests that are on the ballot. You only get a certain set of those contests across the 196, but those 196, when you overlap all the different boundary lines from everyone votes on president, we got that. But when you think about things like state assembly, state senate, congressional, city council, water districts, healthcare districts, fire protection districts, and school districts, community college districts, when you overlap all those different boundary lines on one another and those that will be on the ballot, it creates 196 contests that will be on the ballot across the entire county, and you get one set of those. Now know that the combination of these 196 and the sets of them create 842 types of the ballot, okay? And 842 types of ballots, you get one of those 842, and we have to manage to all of it back at the office. But really, you got to rethink that through those 842, getting back to the federally covered languages, we have to support 5 additional languages, as I mentioned, and we translate all of the materials in English into those 5 other 4 respective languages that are protected communities, that's where you get the 4,210 variations of the ballot, okay? There are 4,210 variations of the ballot that is circulating out there in our community right now. And then in terms of turnout, what will be the turnout in this upcoming election? I am going to be really interested to see whether or not we overcome the 84% turnout, the highest turnout that we've ever had in our county in the 2008 presidential election, which was the first Obama election. The average of the last 4 presidential general election has been a 79.5% turnout. Now, you think about the size and breadth and population of our registered voter population, and you think about that turnout, that is a very robust turnout at just 80% turnout. The last presidential election, the 2016, was an 81.5% turnout. But when you multiply, let's say conservatively, let's say we're going to have an 80% turnout, and you multiply that now with this historic number of registered voters that we have on the books, we're going to see anywhere from most likely 1.5 to 1.6 million voters in this upcoming election is what I expect. Now we'll ultimately see, but we're looking at historical numbers as we try to extrapolate what potentially could occur. And if we overcome that 84% turnout, that will be a pretty well, number one, wonderful number that we've approached, and it could happen with all those confluence of events that is out there. But let me kind of get back to this pandemic. You know, after the policies were made, after the governor issued the executive order in early May about every active registered voter receiving mail ballot, the question was, were there going to be polling places? And the answer to that question came in June of early June, which this governor issued a second executive order related to elections. And that was, yes, there would be, and there would be options for elections officials to be able to pivot. There's 2 fundamental aspects of conducting elections: poll workers and polling locations. And I'll get to that in a split second. But once the policies were made, then elections officials has to execute to those policies. How do you make policies, conceptual policies, now reality? How do you wrap your arms around all the details that we've been planning for years on since the last presidential election and make them reality, that no longer can you go with all those plans that you made for over 4 years? Now you have to do something entirely different. And you really don't make these respective changes on voters, because ultimately, yes, there's major changes happening organizationally, internally to our office, but really where the big issue is will this come across to voters? Will they be informed? Will they know how to interact with this new model that we're having to deploy? And so for us, there's 2 goals. One is to make sure that the voters have confidence in the electoral systems that they're going to be participating in under the cloud of the pandemic. And number 2 is making sure that we're adequately informing voters about these respective changes, whether it's mail ballots or whether it's in-person voting at a polling place. And so we had to come up with something very concise, and that's the Vote Safer San Diego logo. We have to recognize that there is a pandemic. We have to recognize that we have to respond to that pandemic. How are we responding? Well, the logo there encapsulates all of that. The fact that every voter is going to receive a mail ballot, and we want to convey that is the safer option of voting to not allow this virus to spread. As well as what are the options of in all the other concerns around Vote Safer, which is good practices of voting that mail ballot and returning that mail ballot, as well as good practices that we've instituted to ensure that if a person wants to vote at a polling place, that we're creating a safe environment for them to cast their ballot. Okay, as I'm going to go through this, which is, I mentioned those 2 fundamental aspects of conducting elections in terms of elections administration, poll workers and polling locations. Well, the state recognized that these are 2 areas that the pandemic has created a level of uncertainty. So yes, people may grasp that we have less or fewer locations for voters to go to, but again, that is because of the pandemic that we're making these changes, not because of any other things. If I had my druthers, there was no pandemic, we would have 1,600 polling locations. There's a level of insanity of conducting an election in the midst of in the midst of having to make all these respective changes. You just don't do it. You don't do it as an administrator between major election cycles, let alone a presidential election. but we're having to respond associated with it. And so we're needing to make sure that all voters are well informed. And so forums like this is great to be able to communicate what those changes are. The other aspect of this is that, so let's talk about these two areas, poll workers. Well, a number of young folks are poll workers, but also a good percentage of voters are from our 65 plus age group. Those are the same groups that is now at high risk of having complications if they get the virus. And so we have to understand that, yes, we would want 1,600 polling locations and 9,000 poll workers, but would we ever be able to get 9,000 poll workers at the end of the day, even if one's opinions wanted to have that? The answer of that is not likely, because a number of our poll workers are in that 65 plus age group. And I'll show you that in just in a second or two. And then polling places is we got to make sure that we have enough polling places to serve voters at the end of the day if we're going to have a polling place environment. And that's now in question as well because of the total number of polling places that maybe are too small or just going to make themselves unavailable because of the liability purposes of a pandemic, a virus that it causes. So here you can see the poll worker impact. This is the total number of poll workers that served during the March election. As you can see here, 30% of the poll worker population in March that served, that 7,000 to 8,000 poll workers, 30% of them were in that 65 plus age group. But you really can't stop there, because look at the other spectrum of this chart is that 20% of our poll workers come from our 16 to 19 year age group. And what are they doing right now? They're socially distancing and distance learning. They're at home. So that creates a level of questions as well, certain uncertainty for us and for our business, this discipline. It's like any other event-driven organization. We live and die by certainty. We need to make sure that we have whatever we need to be able to conduct the event. I always say that we're like mass wedding planners. We got to make sure that we are able to conduct the marriage, the wedding day, and it makes sure that it goes off without a hitch, right? And so when you have 50% of your population in question, how are you going to be able to conduct that wedding? Or weddings in this case, because there's 1,600 of them is what we were anticipating. You don't. So we got to get to reality of what we're capable of pulling off and successfully doing it, because we're going to have to conduct the biggest election we've ever seen potentially. Polling locations. We had around 1,350 to 1,400 physical sites in March. And look how many people were assigned to a private location. How many of them were neighborhood garages? How many of them were pet grooming stores or pizza parlors, very small locations that really can facilitate social distancing in the highest turnout election in a 4-year period at that 80% average? It's just not going to happen. And I do not want to be a statistic 14 days after election day on a public health official's mind about what the impact was after November 3rd. So we were looking at public facilities and what was our public facilities in our county. And once there are laws on the books that we have the ability to use public facilities as polling locations. And so they were certain in use. And we know that there are schools out there, there are recreation centers and community centers and multi-purpose rooms that we could use that are public facilities that we could use to spread out voters, maybe not to the same numbers as the 1,600, but enough to make sure that we provide social distancing and large enough to handle the surge of voters that potentially would go to a polling place. But also we had to be strategic about this. We had to look at accessibility and geography of our county, which is huge. The geography, 4,500 to 5,000 square miles that we had to cover, and making sure that it was still accessible for voters, and not just voters with disabilities, but voters with, in terms of considerations and factors of considerations, is things like socioeconomic, transportation corridors. We had to think about population densities, because we're so, our voters, yes, there are high population densities along the coastline, but eastward, we have to make sure that we're serving them too. So we had to take a look at all of that. And then I go back to the characteristics of the election itself. We had to look at what is the makeup of the election, and that those 842 versions of the ballot that I talked with you about earlier, because that is a big component, a very technical component, but a part of the structure of an election that had to be maintained for us to be able to pull off this election. Okay, so this is in summary what the law provided after the two executive orders, as well as the state legislature chiming in, which supported the governor's executive orders that was out there. This is what it looked like in March in terms of the kind of the mapping of how the election was in a nutshell. And then this is how November's election is going to be conducted. As opposed to needing 1,548 locations, we're now consolidating them more heavily because of the executive order, which is option 2 under the purple section there in-person voting. And as you can see is that not only these polling locations, what we're calling super polling locations, not only are they going to be open for 1 day, but now they're going to be open for a 4-day window. That's never been done in our county before. Is that yes, there will be fewer locations, but we're going to be open for 4 days. Right? And they're going to be much larger locations because there will be at least on average 2,000 square feet of space. Because we're sending every active registered voter a mail ballot, we are now obligated to ensure that there were enough mail ballot drop-off locations. And you can see the red section versus the blue section there. You can see that we're going to have double the amount of mail ballot drop-off locations in our county currently running right now. They opened on October 6th, and they'll be open all the way through November 3rd at 8 p.m. So not only are we doubling it, but look at the time frame that we're opening them. We're opening them for quadruple the amount of time than we did in March to ensure that people can have another source, another place to drop off their mail ballot if they don't want to drop it off through the U.S. Postal Service. But let me just convey to the audience here and to all of you is that my number one recommendation is to vote your ballot, your mail ballot, and because it's prepaid, there's a prepaid postage envelope and your iVoted sticker in that mail ballot packet, is to send it back through the U.S. Postal Service right now. And the reason why is because how many collection boxes does the U.S. Postal Service serve? If you got your mail ballot, that means they're doing a pretty good job in terms of this. Any of this notion of that, whether or not the U.S. Postal Service is going to be timely in their delivery. Well, if you have your mail ballot, they're pretty timely. Mine, I just found out, is going to be in the mailbox today because I have what is known as the U.S. Postal Service's informed delivery, where they send me a image of every single one of my pieces of mail every day. And today I looked at it and there I could see it in my inbox, my mail ballot right there. Now my wife and my son received their mail ballot on Monday. So it's the U.S. Postal Service has a great infrastructure out there. They've never done us wrong in past elections. So what makes us think that they're going to do us wrong this go around? Now, that's not to say that we won't monitor the situation, but our U.S. local, our U.S. Postal Service in general, but our local representatives, we've had a long dialogue and partnership and communications with them. So they're solid in terms of it. But if you want to drop it off at any one of the ballot drop-off locations, you're certainly welcome to do that too. They're stood up as we speak, and you can do so. And make sure that you know when those are open each respective day. Now, let me just say that every voter, if you end up going to a polling location, you're still assigned one of the 235 locations that are out there that will be open from October 31st through November 3rd. That hasn't changed in terms of that assignment. Why are we doing that? Because we do not want a free-for-all situation. We don't want any voter going to any respective location, because what that does is two things. One, potentially creates the spread of the virus, because some people are going to congregate to one location and not congregate in another location because they're all funneling into one or a couple of locations. We don't want that to happen. We want voters to be spread out and to do that within the region, right? Within the area that they are from and where their polling location is. So that's going to be key in staving off the crowds and the potential of spreading the virus. But number two, preventing long lines from voters being able to cast their ballots. That's a fundamental in any elections administrators' principles, is to make sure that you're planning accordingly to ensure that there's no lengthy long line on election day. And voter cooperation is going to be absolutely necessary to understand this and to act upon it. And if you plan on going to vote, don't wait till November 3rd. You might want to go on October 31st or November 1st or November 2nd to avoid those respective crowds. Poll workers, as I mentioned, if you've ever served as a poll worker before, you may have done so on just election day. You had to go to 2 hours worth of training and then you served on election day. Now in this upcoming election, if you serve as a poll worker, it's upwards of a 9-day commitment, 4 days to work these days that they're open, 2 days of training as opposed to 2 hours of training, and the fact that you have a day to set up the site and a day to break down the site, and then also to receive all the equipment. If you come on campus here, you'll see just extensive, we've essentially overtaken the county campus because we were trying to prepare for this upcoming election. We've essentially taken all the different parking spaces out there in our front parking lot. And then let me just say that we've launched into the most robust and comprehensive voter education ever that we've ever done of this office. Just simply, again, you just don't make these respective changes. And if you're going to make the changes, you have to make sure that you are doing everything in your power to inform every single registered voter out there. Okay. I'm not going to go into this slide in much detail, but if there's any concerns about the U.S. Postal Service, look at the last point on the slide, which is the legislature has stepped in and said, if the ballot, your mail ballot is postmarked by election day and received 17 days afterwards, that ballot is timely cast. Okay. So if there's any concerns about the U.S. Postal Service, you've just got to make sure that the ballot is in and postmarked by election day. I wouldn't chance it by just doing it on election day by dropping off. I'd do it like a couple of days before, so you're just certain of that it'll be postmarked. And for us, we are always recommending for this upcoming election is to put it through the mail by October 27th. That's just a recommendation. You don't have to do that, knowing that this now is laws in place. But the operative term here is it has to be postmarked by election day. Okay. And again, I can go through, all of how we're going to be able to meet the capacity, but again, I've already talked about that this is not a new phenomenon for us to prepare for the election. Polling places, these 235 super polls locations, know that there will be more poll workers, more voting booths, more space, all the personal protective equipment from plexiglass, which are also known as sneeze guards, face shields, face masks, gloves, face masks for voters, gloves for voters. We have worked very diligently with our public health officials to map out a course to ensure that voters who go to a polling place will be able to vote in a healthy and a safe environment. All the protocols of cleaning and disinfecting all the respective equipment or items that will be usable or shareable is all mapped out already. We'll have a site-specific plan. Every single one of the 235 sites has its own layout of how to keep everyone safe and what those protocols are, and that's in place. But as I say, everything that we're doing and protecting and the safeguards to ensure that there's no voter fraud, like we're introducing not just one check-in, but now 7 check-ins, and we're introducing and expanding the technology of electronic poll books, which protects any level of double voting that would occur. There's always been safeguards in place, even when we didn't have these electronic poll books, but know that these electronic poll books give us more transparency of how Max has voted, whether or not Max voted his mail ballot or didn't. And if he shows up, if he did and he shows up, we'll know that we received it. He cannot vote a regular ballot. He'll have to vote a provisional ballot because that's how we prevent double voting from happening. But if he didn't return it, we'll know that. And so we could suspend that mail ballot and reissue another a regular ballot for him. That's how we protect our democracy and the integrity of the election. But having said all the protections and all the safeguards at an in-person polling place environment, my focus here and my recommendation is for voters to vote that mail ballot and only vote that go to an in-person site as an alternative of voting that mail ballot because you need to or because you want to. It's okay if you want to because you believe that democracy has always been about polling places. That's fine. That's certainly within your right to go to your assigned polling location and vote your ballot. But there's also populations that we know that need to vote their a mail ballot or in person. People that are voters with disabilities that need an in-person experience. People that did not receive their mail ballot and it's too late to get them their mail ballot, a ballot through the mail. Individuals that received their mail ballot and made a mistake on it and now they need a replacement mail ballot. There's going to be individuals that did not register on time and now they have to exercise what is known as conditional voter registration or same-day registration, which is the act of registering and voting same day at the respective site that they're at. Those are individuals that we're really focused on and trying to convey our message. Here's what it looks like traditionally in the neighborhood polling place precincts. Here's what it's going to look like. I'm sorry. Let's let it go through here because I want to kind of wrap this up to give Meg some time. I'm stealing hopefully too much time here. But once we see all those different pieces, this is what I mean by ballot typing, that everyone gets a specific ballot type and precincts that are out there, and we have to combine because we're consolidating more heavily than what the traditional neighborhood polling place format. And after we do that, then we can strategically cite the physical sites, the actual physical locations of these polling locations that are out there. Many of them are schools. Okay. Now let's talk about that voter education and outreach effort. In August, we launched into the program, the efforts, and we sent every voter this mailer in early August to make sure that voters knew the exact same thing I'm describing today, is that there are changes in this upcoming election. We launched to sending every voter this piece of mail describing what was going to happen. Every voter is going to receive a mail ballot. Everyone, there's going to be fewer locations, but they're going to be open much longer. Make sure that you know that most likely your location that you've potentially gone to for years has changed. We asked you to verify your residence address as well as your mailing address, so we make sure that you update that record on file so we can send you your mail ballot, and it wouldn't be delayed because you didn't update it with our office in advance of us mailing you your mail ballot. We've sent out those sample ballot pamphlets. This is what we sent. 180,000 voters asked for their sample ballot pamphlet to be emailed to them. That's great. It's a contactless way. It's less in terms of taxpayer money by sending it through the U.S. Postal Service. We see that as increasing once we have voters' preferences, and that they see that as the better way of and more timely and more efficient way of getting their local sample ballot and voter information pamphlet. We started sending out the mail ballots starting on October 5th. Voters started receiving it, and they continue to receive it through the rest of this week. And then what they saw inside were some new things that we tried to do to convey this upcoming election. These two pieces right here, this one and right here, are all about information for the voters. The fact that we listed the 3 closest mail ballot drop-off locations that they could use if they wanted to do that, as opposed to dropping it through the mail. The fact that you can track your mail to safeguard, you can take ownership of your own ballot by subscribing for Where's My Ballot, the new service where we will send you notifications as to how it's traveling to you through the U.S. Postal Service to your mailbox, and when is it traveling back to our office, and letting you know when we've received it as well as when we've accepted it. And then your ballot, of course, is there as well. Okay. And we've kind of tackled this issue of ballot harvesting in our own way, and talk about the good practices of voting your mail ballot, particularly for those that generally don't vote by mail. For us, it's sign, seal, and return that ballot to a trusted source. So sign the back of the envelope, seal the ballot inside the envelope, and then to return it to one of these 3 methods that is out there, either through the post office, through our mail ballot drop-off locations. Again, that period of time for the mail ballot drop-off is October 6th, currently going on all the way through November 3rd. And then our super polls locations, any of them, you can drop off your mail ballot. And there's 235 of those. And those will be, again, open on October 31st through November 3rd. And I should say one more thing about safeguarding your ballot. Make sure that you're clearly marking that ballot and filling in those bubbles with black or blue ink pen. Okay. Now, we're going to be sending a postcard for those voters that haven't returned their mail ballot. It's going to be a point in time, so they may have already sent it back to us, but we'll have to cut the voter registration file at some point as to who has not returned their mail ballot, and we're going to send them this postcard that you see here. Okay. Okay, let's talk about what we've already started launching into, all the creatives that we've done, to all the blitz that we've done from a media perspective. And it's a series of conversations there, not just overwhelming the public with all this information. So we started launching into Be Vote Ready. We talked about making sure you verify your registration or register to vote in advance, knowing that later on that you're going to receive a mail ballot. After that, and how to vote that mail ballot. Once you receive it, what are the ways to vote that mail ballot, and sign, seal, and return that ballot, and track your ballot as well. And then also engage high school students as well. And so they created some of these products for us that we've been able to highlight that's out there. All the material that we do is in English, as well as all the federally covered languages that are out there. And here's some of the products that we've created, not just in English, but in Chinese and Vietnamese and Filipino, and Spanish, which are our federal covered languages. I've already talked with you about Track Your Ballot as well as from Informed Delivery and Where's My Ballot, both free services that you can use. Where's My Ballot? You can find that at sdvote.com. Informed Delivery, which is a U.S. Postal Service, go to their website. It's free of charge, easy, very simple. I'm not going to necessarily go through these key dates with you because the slide deck will be sent to Max, but these are the key dates. Not much time left in the day before we hit the November 3rd election. And then lastly, too many voters are out there still probably not informed about how this election is going to be conducted. It's your responsibility to pass on important information and talk about this upcoming election. Not so much as who a person's going to vote for and what that is, but also beyond that, how this election is going to be conducted. So I would ask all of you to talk with your friends, your families, your neighbors, other organizations that you belong into, and talk about the accurate information that I've just talked with you about today. And if you didn't capture all of it, all of this is on very concisely on sdvote.com. So with that being said, I'm going to turn the time over to Max, and apologies if I went over my allotted time, Max.
No problem there. We, of course, we just made sure that we have a buffer of time in case we do go over, because there is a lot of information we need to cover. So there is just a reminder to our viewers here, make sure if you haven't registered to vote already, and if you are 16, you can pre-register to vote. So when you turn 18, that registration will go through, and then you will be registered to vote automatically if you fill out that pre-registration form with all of the information. So then you don't need to worry, let's say, especially with people who have October birthdays, and they really have not that much time to register to vote, they can pre-register to vote. Anyone can when they turn 16. So to register to vote or to pre-register to vote still, you can go to mfolsd.com/vote. Or you can go to sdvote.com, and there's a button right there that should say register to vote. And then I believe voter registration, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but voter registration ends on the 17th, correct?
October 19th, Max.
19th. Okay, perfect. That is the 19th. Forget what I said there.
Again, that's October 19th for the state of California. So if there's anyone that
for the state of California,
it might be a different date. Yeah. Okay.
So make sure to do your research if you live in a different state, but this is all across California. And then now I'd like to pass the torch over to Meg and just remind everyone, if you have any questions while this is going on, in the YouTube, in the comments, you can put your question right there. We'll be monitoring it. And then you can also submit it to the Google form on vote.mfolsd.com. Okay, Meg, it's all yours.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Max, Natalie, and March for Our Lives for putting on this incredible event. Thank you, Michael, for that wonderful presentation. So much incredible information. I have notes here. I've been jotting things down furiously, all really important stuff. I am Meg Thode. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters San Diego. And as I get screen share going, I am, let's see, excited to share with you all a little bit about our organization. Here we are. Everyone see that okay? Great. So League of Women Voters San Diego 2020, our goal is to create confident voters. I'd like to start by giving a little bit of background on the League. So the League of Women Voters was actually founded in 1920 by leaders of the women's suffrage movement. For over 100 years now, we've been working as a nonpartisan activist grassroots organization that believes voters have a critical role to play in the process of making our democracy more perfect. To that end, the League does advocate for some policy measures that align with our positions on making democracy work. Some propositions on the ballot this year are being endorsed by the League, and you can find all that information on our website. But today, I am here in a purely educational capacity. I'm not advocating for anything, only here to educate. As a nonpartisan organization, the League never supports or opposes any particular candidate or political party. So that's a little bit of background on us. One of our key roles, as I mentioned, is education. As Michael has said, this year is a particularly interesting one. But as always, our public policy teams have studied the state propositions and local ballot measures. And we have all different ways to help you as a voter learn more and become more confident in casting your ballot. So we have some traditional events such as prop talks, proposition talks, where we go through all the state propositions and local ballot measures. We offer candidate forums for mayoral candidates, school board, all kinds of different positions. Of course, this year, those events have been translated into a Zoom webinar format, something I'm sure everyone is really familiar with at this point. We also, though, as Michael said, this year's forced a lot of us to get creative. So we've come up with some new initiatives. This year, we started the 101 Days of Action campaign. This was a brand new project. So starting back in July, which feels like a million years ago, we started a campaign on our social media where every day leading up to the election, we share different actions you can take to become more engaged in the system, to learn more, something we call pre-bunking or pre-debunking, sharing good information before misinformation can get out there, promoting events, all sorts of different active things that you can do leading up to the election to become more involved in your community, to become more educated on the things that will be in the ballot this year. As well as, to build networks and share information among others to make this an active collective activity, which voting should be. It's all about community. As well, our Youth Empowerment Committee has been super busy. I'm really proud and excited to be a part of that committee. We've launched a TikTok this summer, which I, only pretend to understand, but also have been super busy on Facebook and Instagram. We had a really cool initiative this year that just, there's an event coming up on Saturday. It's called #ExpressYourVote, where we welcome submissions from local artists reflecting on and responding to some of the measures that will be on the ballot this year. So to take voting from something, maybe more quantitative, more cerebral, and tie it back to those emotions that propel us to vote in the first place, and understanding the connections, the things that make community, make voting so important. So up on the screen, you can see some snapshots of all of those things. You can see more at our website. But all of these different projects, all these different initiatives are to help make voting something you feel confident doing. So many of us have ideas, we have values, we have passion, but we don't always know how to translate that into action, especially when it comes to voting. There are changes to the system this year. Nothing, insurmountable, but maybe this year we need to read up a little more, understand what those changes are to make sure that our voice can be heard, because our voice matters. In addition to our own projects and initiatives, we love to share these resources. Votersedge.org is an incredible website. Whether this is your first election or you consider yourself a policy wonk, they have great information on the different ballot measures, understanding what do supporters say, what do opponents say, following the money. They include great information on funds that are raised, supporting and opposing different measures, but also starting to understand what might the fiscal effects be. What does this proposition, I see ads on my phone, I see ads on TV, but what does this proposition really get at? SD Vote with the San Diego Registrar of Voters, an incredible resource. We are so lucky to have so many of you working so hard to protect our right to vote. The Easy Voter Guide for the state of California, also something made available in several different languages. This is a great quick reference. What does a yes vote mean? What does a no vote mean? And a little bit of background. So as you're receiving your ballot and figuring out, how can I use my vote in a smart way? That's a great resource to consult. And then finally, League of Women Voters San Diego are different. We have some videos. North County League I was really excited to be a part of the process, making a ballot explainer video in Spanish for the first time. So really helping all San Diegans understand, what's on this ballot and how can I be a confident voter. So we are super excited to get to everyone's questions tonight. So I will go ahead and wrap it up. But to close, I'd like to thank everyone one more time for tuning in. It is people like you that make this democracy a better place. And then just to continue this conversation beyond, this particular event, do check us out on all of these platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or online. Just Google League of Women Voters San Diego. So thank you so much. We're excited to get on with the event. And for now, I'll turn it back over to you, Max.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Both of you, your presentations were enlightening, spread so much information. Meg, you brought up a really, really good point there where this goes for everyone. Don't just listen to what your political party tells you. Don't just listen to what they tell you to vote for. Vote for what you believe is right, what you believe you should vote for. And by doing that, you really need to do all of your research. So you have the voter's edge. You can go to the registrar of voters. They have the pamphlet that they send out of just what the information about the candidates that they've sent out. And those informations from both sides. I know especially they include different for and against different comments that people have submitted for and against different ballot measures. So make sure to go read up on those, see what credible sources specifically have said about these measures and these candidates. And I'm just like to affirm and reassure everyone, March for Our Lives is a nonpartisan organization, and we do not endorse candidates. We do endorse ballot measures, but we are not here to discuss that. We are here strictly to discuss voting and educating people on the vote. So now going forward, I have one just personal question, Mr. Vu. What is it? We have seen that the high school program for people under 18 who want to register to be a poll worker, that's no longer available. What's the reasoning behind that?
Thanks for the question. It's actually one of the most unfortunate pieces of this whole pandemic that I really feel bad on. And one would think that we would turn towards our high school or population poll workers, particularly in a pandemic. It seems almost contradictory, if you will, of that you see that 65 plus age group, and then so you would want to get individuals of a younger age. The reason why we didn't do so is because of the 9 days that we were just talking about, because these super polls locations would be open for a 4-day period, because we would need to make sure that there's a robust level of training. So we're now requiring 2 additional days of training as opposed to 2-hour training. So there's 6 days. The fact that a student would need to be pulled away for a day to set up, as well as a day to break down the respective site, there's 8 days. And then depending on the respective position is to receive the equipment at the respective super polling location. That could be upwards of 9 days. And so would a student be able to really not just volunteer, again, they would get paid as well. So that's number one. And then once we were able to overcome, if one would still wanted to participate, again, the school districts, I would think, would have a big issue with our office of trying to pull students away. And normally around 2,000 students participate in our high school poll worker program. I mean, a big number. Like I said, this is one of the kind of the unfortunate sides of this pandemic, as well as conducting elections. But we're taxing our schools as well. When I say taxing our schools, is that we are already asking a lot of the schools to be polling places for our operations. right? Because because of the public facilities, as opposed to leaning towards public facilities as opposed to private facilities. And the reasons why we are leaning towards more public facilities as opposed to private facilities is because we saw the lessons learned of your Floridas, your North Carolinas, your Georgias, where polling locations that were used historically, that were private facilities, were then turned away. The elections administrator would be not be able to use it, which then created confusion and chaos for the voter, as well as a mad scramble for elections administrators like myself. So that's one reason. The second reason, let's say there was still this issue that we could work through the school system, that we would pull students away for 9 days potentially, or even 8 days. So let's say we were able to overcome that. Then, because we are paying every single student, or actually in this case, every single poll worker a hourly salary, now you've got potential labor law issues that we have to address in all of this because of a number of different factors. Hours worked, right? Do you need a work permit? Because we potentially could hire you. And if we're going to do it, we have to go back to this high school student poll worker program written by law. And would we be subject to all the labor laws associated with it, which the students would need to have to get a work permit? And let me give you another aspect of all of this, is that in certain cases, some of our poll workers are going to have to travel almost every single one of those days, those 9 days, 3 hours to get to their respective site. Remember that our geography here. So some of our poll workers that we're going to have for this upcoming election is going to have to travel approximately 3 hours, like 90 miles each in a day, not each way, but in a day, because they're having to travel 90 miles total to get to their site to work. So those are some of the complications around this, and they're logistical, some of it's legal, and then certainly some of this is dealing with your education itself or a student's education.
Thank you so much. And I mean, that's really clarifying for so many people, because I've gotten that question when talking to people of, oh, wait, why can't the people under 18 register to become a poll worker? And now we have an explanation, and that makes a lot of sense. And then also, I mean, just thinking about it, we don't want the students who are immunocompromised to get COVID-19, and then because they are underage, the registrar of voters to be liable for that happening. And then, yeah, going forward, I'd like to just remind you guys again, register to vote. If you are 18 or over, do us who are under 18 a favor. If you are healthy, we want you to stay home. If you're immunocompromised, we want you to be safe. But if you are healthy enough, please go register to be a poll worker. When is that deadline, Mr. Vu?
We're still actively recruiting. I don't think there ever generally is a deadline when it comes down to poll workers. And if you end up not serving, we certainly want your name, because remember, there's always another election around the corner to prepare for. Can I add?
That's amazing.
Next, can I add a couple?
Yeah, go ahead.
Although we are not having poll workers, as I mentioned, we are trying to engage high school students in other ways. We had if you will, we asked voters, high school students to provide artwork to our office on what Vote Safer San Diego County, Vote Safer San Diego meant to them, and provide that in some type of artistic way. We had a young lady by the name of Lauren Crane, who's getting her trying to achieve her Golden Award, who did this wonderful project and a mural and engaging high schools and through the various school districts to get people registered to vote. So we've been trying in our own way to supplement something that we cannot provide for students as it relates to poll workers in this upcoming election, and do it in other ways that we can engage them in this and have them participate in some other civic level than working at their respective polling locations. That's going to change, after this election. We certainly want to get back to how do we engage the high school students. And they've been such a great resource for not just ourselves, but they're not just their community, but other poll workers that are up in age, if you will. And just seeing that synergy, that dynamic that happens between the two is such a great experience. And for me, it's just from being able to observe it as opposed to actually experiencing it myself with those two groups of individuals coming together.
Yeah, and that's true that there are all of these other methods to get involved with this election. And some of them you can volunteer with a local political campaign that you support. That's another way, because a lot of these campaigns are doing voter outreach, getting people to actually go to the polls and vote. And I mean, I'm going to challenge all of the voters out there right now. Let's try and go forward, how Michael had said, and let's exceed the voter turnout rate. Let's try and get an 85% voter turnout rate. Let's try for that, because that's the strength of our democracy, having more people vote in every election. So let's just try and get 85%. Let's just do us all a favor, please. So next going
Max,
forward,
can I jump in here on that for 1 second? I just want to say that League of Women Voters and one of our sister partner organizations, Women's March San Diego, they have some great campaigns right now around postcarding and text banking, all of these things you can do peer-to-peer. Women's March Action has a specific campaign getting 18 to 35-year-olds to reach out to other 18 to 35-year-olds. Because it's, you know, those very same personal connections that have the greatest impact and can be what motivates someone to actually get out and vote. So like you're saying, you know, there are actionable things you can do.
Yeah, and I was going to announce this a little bit later, but from the information, I'll do it now. From the information that we are getting, we have some people who are taking notes, watching this, who we have actually a whole watch party of people right now from some of our members who are watching this to learn more about voting, and kind of just hanging out together and watching this. So shout out to all of you guys. You guys know who you are. But we are actually going to launch on our website, the vote.mfolsd.com. We're going to turn that after this event. So hopefully in the next few days, we're going to turn that into a voter education resource center. So providing resources from the Registrar of Voters and from League of Women Voters from this specific event. And then just any other resources that we come across, we're going to try and spread the word about voting, get more people to register to vote. Because we know, especially I think in the last 10 years, it's been the youth vote that has been lacking. So we want to get the youth to go out and vote. So I'm going to pass this off to Natalie, and we're going to start with some of our questions.
Yeah, so before I ask the questions, I just want to say thank you to Meg and Mr. Vu for all that incredible information you shared. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure that everyone else did. And thank you for your hard work in order to make the elections happen, even under these very hard circumstances. And so we will start with our first question by Lisa Thode from Carlsbad, California. And she asked, what precautions are being taken by the ROV and their poll working volunteers to reduce the likelihood of cross-contact contamination on shared surfaces and implements like pens, clipboards, and signature books? Also, will volunteers be wearing face shields and gloves as well as face masks?
Thank you so much. I love it when the first question is from another Carlsbad resident. I too live in Carlsbad. So let me answer that respective question. We have 21 pallets of plexiglass that came into our building this past Monday to be distributed out to the 235 Super Polls locations. Those are those plexiglass shields that you see it whether you go to a grocery store or Costco these days. Wherever you go, you see these plexiglass shields. Know that our poll workers, our polling locations will have plexiglass as a voter checks into with their respective poll workers. There will be face shields. We've purchased over 24,000 face shields that has come in. We have over 25,000 tubs of hand sanitizing wipes. We've got 700,000 gloves that we've purchased. We've purchased 300,000 masks for not just our poll workers, but also for voters as well, should they forget to bring their respective masks. We have the gloves will be used for voters as well as our poll workers. But let me just also say that we've been also closely working with our public health officials and learning how to use all this personal protective equipment. And one may think that face shields is a great thing and you don't have to wear a mask, but what we're learning is mask is the preferred way of protecting everyone. And it's only when a person, let's say you're going to assist someone that is not sight impaired, but is deaf, is being able to read lips, is to then take the mask off with the face shield. The gloves, we've talked with our public health officials about that our poll workers, specific types, depending on their respective roles, should be wearing gloves. And when they're disinfecting shareable equipment, like our ballot marking devices or pens or clipboards that is out there, or the hard surfaces, that's where a person wants to wear gloves. But our normal poll workers, what is the best practice? The best practice is for all poll workers to wash their hands often. And gloves may actually spread the virus if not used appropriately. About donning and doffing of the respective gloves. So as you can tell, we very much have spoke with our public health officials as to what are the good practices, because we don't know them and we're not the subject matter experts on this. The public health officials are. So they've helped us through the egress as well as the ingress as a voter is coming inside the building and then exiting the respective location. That is one way in, one way out, to the extent that you can provide that. The fact that there's a level of social distancing going to be required, 6 feet of social distancing that is out there. The fact that we're doing site-specific plans of the respective layout for every single one of the 235 locations that we have out there. And the list continues and goes on and on and on. The other thing is we're offering testing for every single one of our poll workers as well as seasonal staff. I got tested today just as to make it a routine aspect of ensuring that we will be able to withstand this pandemic and get through the election day events, as well as the 30 days that we certify the election after election day to keep everyone safe and healthy in this upcoming election. So that's just a small sliver of balancing and prioritizing that we're having to do under this pandemic, and then also meet all the other expectations that you have of this office, which is the utmost integrity, accuracy, transparency, security over the ballots when I end up certifying the election 30 days after election day.
Thank you. It definitely sounds like the ROV is taking a lot of precautions, and it's really nice to hear when institutions actually listen to the science and talk to the public health officials. And I think that everyone who's listening can be reassured that you guys are taking all of the necessary precautions.
Yeah, I echo what Natalie said. Just a follow-up question onto that, though. What can the people do in addition to wearing masks, washing their hands frequently? I mean, what can the people do when going into the polls to ensure that they are not spreading COVID-19?
Well, again, this is going to, the community has to come together on this. Again, it's the largest event of individuals coming together to exercise one fundamental right, which is the act of voting. So I would say a couple of things is be well prepared. And we always say voters should be well prepared, but in this specific case, it's not just be well prepared about and maybe marking your sample ballot that we issued to you when we mailed out the sample ballot and voter information pamphlet, the local guide. Mark that ballot, sample ballot in advance. That way you're not prolonging the time inside that voting booth and prolonging the exposure to anyone else that may have the virus. Make sure you are going to bring a mask. We're going to ask for voters to ensure that they're well prepared, and part of that preparation is bringing your mask. Make sure that you are going to socially know that there's going to be a requirement to socially distance, and there's going to be a level of patience. Like any other thing that you're doing these days when you go grocery shopping, is to ensure that there is patience involved here. you know, when it comes down to the active voting and this issue of where our country is right now, at the end of the day, where voter cooperation, what I would ask is that at the end of the day, regardless of your principles, regardless of your philosophical beliefs on any given topic that is out there, regardless of the polarization that is out there, every voter has the right to go inside a polling place, free of intimidation, free of interference, freely to be able to cast their, free of rhetoric, to cast their ballot however they want to. The polling place is a sanctuary for voters to be able to do that. And I would hope that regardless of all the consternation about any given subject that is out there, that we at least could come together to know that during that 13-hour window is for everyone.
Yeah, that's really good. And then I think we're gonna, I think Natalie actually has a follow-up questions to that about, I think, do we have that in the list?
Related to what he said or just different questions?
The next question.
Yeah, okay. So this question has a few parts. So first of all, what are some common mistakes which will make a ballot invalid? And what can someone do if they make a mistake? And lastly, after the deadline to request a ballot, if someone makes a mistake, can they still do something to vote, or is their vote just completely invalid?
Get myself off of mute there. What would make a ballot invalid? So really, what makes a ballot invalid is not very much these days. I mean, the laws are pretty clear that the legislature has pretty much have protected voters. And that's one of the reasons why we're given the 30 days is to really, if there was some type of issue, we have the ability to give them sufficient time to notify that they could cure it. Normally, I would say when it comes down to mail balloting is make sure that it's timely cast. That's the -- reasons why mail ballots are rejected. It's not very high in our county. It's really, frankly, the percentages are really, really, really small. But the fact is that we want to make sure that we're able to cast every ballot that's validly cast. And part of that is making sure that it's timely cast. So again, that what I talked about earlier is making sure that that ballot is postmarked by election day. Again, the 17-day window, we should be able to receive that ballot back well within that 17-day window, but make sure that ballot is postmarked well before November 3rd, or at minimum by November 3rd, or on November 3rd. That's number one. The other aspect of this is the signature itself. Make sure that you are signing it. There are cases where voters fail to sign the back of their envelope. There's not very many of those either, because again, we have to allow and notify the voter that they didn't sign the back of their envelope so that they could cure it and provide us their signature. But in the off case that we can't get a hold of them because we try to notify them, that would potentially be a case. And then the signature comparison of it, again, we compare signatures against the signature on file. That's their registration form against that envelope, that mail ballot envelope. And in that respective case, you may be notified. And again, you have upwards of a 28-day period before I certified the election to cure it with our office. In all the other situations, if we have the ballot in hand, we're able to count the ballot. In certain cases, the ballot can't go through our automated scanners, our tabulation scanners, but we have a whole process to remake that ballot onto a ballot that is unvoted, and there's a big chain of custody as we go through it. It takes two people to do it. It's actually pretty extensive, but they could help themselves to make sure that the ballot is free and clear of, and clear. When I say clear, I'm talking about clearly marked. You'd be surprised on how many voters put a little dot in the middle of the bubble as opposed to filling it in. They circle around the bubble as opposed to filling it in. They put a little check mark inside of it. And so we want to make sure that votes are clearly marked when you do so. And if you can help us out on that, that would be great. And then what was the second portion of your question?
It was, what can someone do if they make a mistake? And what happens if they make a mistake after the deadline to request a ballot?
Okay, so in terms of the deadline, if you've made a mistake, you can need a replacement ballot. Again, we have the ability, because we're tracking every ballot, that's part of the safeguards here. We have the ability to suspend that mail ballot because you've made a mistake and reissue you a new mail ballot. Now, if it's too late for us to mail you the ballot, because it takes time to be able to do that, you can certainly go to any one of our super polling locations. Actually, your assigned super polling locations that a voter is assigned to, and cast get a replacement ballot there. There is another tool called a remote accessible vote by mail system that one could use, where we can email you the ballot, but you would still have to return it through the mail or drop it off at any one of the sites that we talked about by election day.
Great, thank you so much. I think that clarified some. Oh, sorry, you wanted to say something, Meg?
No, I guess I just had a sort of follow-up question on the whole thing, if that's all right. So for some of us, it hasn't been that long, but maybe it's been a couple of years since we signed our registration. And you know, some of us, sometimes we include a middle name or a middle initial if we're concerned about our signature matching what was put on that original registration form. Do you have any guidance for us?
Meg, I appreciate that. And let me just say that the League of Women Voters has always been such a great, close relationship and partners with our office. And Meg, you did a wonderful job in terms of your presentation and well representing the League of Women Voters. When it comes down to the signature itself, it doesn't have to be an exact match. Let me just be clear about that. The laws are clear on this, is that there's a liberal construction of the law, is what you would say, or we are required to liberally construe in favor of the voter. So let's say you filled out your full name and then you just initialed your envelope and send it back to our office. We have the ability to look at the unique characteristics of how you sign your initials and compare the first letter and the last your first letter of your first name and the first letter of your last name, and compare that against your signature and that first letter and your signature of the first name and the first letter of that last name, to see if it's a match. And not so much as a match, but does it compare? And if it compares, we can count that ballot as being validly cast. Some of the recommendations that we've been given, if you looked at your ballot, as part of that wrap that I showed you on there, it has instructions. And what we're asking and recommending to voters, if you don't know how you really signed your registration form, you can look at your driver's license or your state ID. And on there, you'll see that your signature is on there. And because the person has the ability to register online, and where do we get the signature from when you register online? It's through the DMV. And so since that's also on your driver's license, you can sign it that way. But again, we're looking at all the various unique characteristics of a signature. We're looking at how they loop their L's, how they sign their dot their I's, or even their respective T's. We're looking at various slants. Is it, how far is the slants going on? And we're looking at many other objects of that signature than just the signature itself. So again, we liberally construe in the favor of the voter. The laws are clear on this, is that we are to do so. And as I said before, signature verification, or rejecting a signature because it does not compare, is very small at the end of the day.
Gotcha. Thank you. That sounds very James Bond, but incredible.
Yeah, thank you, Meg, for asking that question. That was actually something that had popped into my head while he was talking, and I forgot to ask it. So thank you so much. Yeah, and then let's go on. We have a question about, let's see. Here, you can, I'm pulling it up, sorry. We have a question from Monica Rabin from La Mesa, California. And the question is, who will be held accountable if the Postal Service fails to account for mail-in votes that could be crucial in determining the outcome of the election? You kind of already touched on this, but do you want to answer that?
Again, I'm not quite sure in what format it is, but the U.S. Postal Service, like I said, is very robust. We have the close partnerships with them. They know frankly, they're in the spotlight these days. If anything, they're more sensitive about making sure that everything is going as planned for their operations, make sure that they're looking at all the timely cast ballots and making sure that it's within our possession. But every election it's like this. It's no difference than that. And again, we have the ability to determine the postmark date in a variety of different ways. But like I said, if at the end of the day, and it's not just the U.S. Postal Service. It could be, our mail ballot drop-off locations, everything. For us is just making sure that we're doing a very extensive sweep of any place where there's going to be mail ballots that needs to get into our possession that is out there. Now, at the end of the day, regardless of whoever it is, if a circumstance has a specific situation occurs, and let's say there are ballots out there, it might need to be resolved by the court system. I might need to go to the court system and just say, here's what the law provides, and here's what the circumstances are. And we need the courts to kind of chime in this area because it's maybe gray at the end of the day. But certainly that hasn't really necessarily happened, at least under my watch. So I'm pretty confident that won't happen this go around because of all of the eyes and ears on not just the presidential race, by the way. If that was kind of the thought is about the presidential race, remember there's 195 other contests that are on the ballot. The presidential race, because of the electoral college vote, may not be very close in the state of California. What will be? It's all those local contests out there. The 195 contests that are on the ballot, whether it's a state, whether it's the water district, whether it's another special district, whether it's your city council, or even the city of San Diego mayor. I hear that I read an article that's kind of like neck and neck there. So that's where it's going to really count.
Thank you so much on that. And then before we go on to any more questions, we have a special video guest from a organization called they're called Rock the Vote. I don't know if I'm pretty sure a lot of you have heard of them, but we have a special video appearance from a bunch of interns from Rock the Vote. They actually were unable to make it because of their capacity trying to expand voter education and outreach and accessibility for everyone. But those who are not familiar with Rock the Vote, they actually have a voter protection hotline. So this is for all of our viewers. If something happens in which we have a really amazing registrar of voters and registrar staff, so this should never happen, and we hope it doesn't happen. But there is some hotline. So I'm pulling it up right now because I had accidentally just closed the tab. But before I show that, I'm going to show this video from their interns. So let me share my screen real quick. But before I show that, I'm going to show this video
I'm Marianne.
from their interns. Can you hear it? So let me share my
Charles.
screen real quick.
I'm Grace.
And
I'm Marianne.
We're interns with Rock the Vote,
but
and we're here to
before
talk about the importance of
I
voting.
show that, I'm going to show this video
I'm Marianne.
from their interns. Can you hear it?
We're already
So let me
watching
share my
This
screen
is a
real quick.
huge topic,
I'm Grace.
but it's so necessary.
And
We hope you can stick with us
Marianne.
for the rest of this video
We're
as we
interns with
discuss
Rock the Vote,
why
but
we're here to talk
before
about the importance of
I
voting.
show that, I'm going to show this video
I'm Marianne.
from their interns. Can you hear it?
We're already
So let me
watching.
share my
This
screen
is a
real quick.
huge topic, but it's so necessary.
And
We hope you can
I'm
stick with
Marianne.
us for the rest of this video as we discuss why
but
we're here to talk
before
about the importance of
I
voting.
show that, I'm going to show this video
I'm Marianne.
from their interns. Can you hear it?
We're already
So let me
watching.
share my
This
screen
is a
real quick.
huge topic, but it's
Okay, that's weird. I was frozen. Sorry about that. The audio was looped. That's weird. Here, give me a second.
No worries. I think, yeah, if we try and reload the video fresh, we'll get to enjoy this wonderful thing they created for us.
Huh, okay. Let me refresh it maybe and try again. If this
Max-
doesn't,
Can I ask, is it okay if I jump in with a question while you're refreshing and
Yeah.
doing internet stuff?
Mhm.
Michael, I just wanted to ask you a question. We use the term postmarked a lot, but not all of us may understand exactly what that means. Is that the day that I put it in the mailbox or the day that I lick the envelope? What exactly does it mean to get postmarked?
I had to ask the U.S. Postal Service this exact same question as well. Is that when the U.S. Postal Service, everyone, whether it's a stamp or not a stamp, and in this case, everyone receives a return postage paid envelope so that they can return their ballot. So what they mean by that is that they're canceling out that postage, right? And that's the postmark, and there's a date associated when they cancel that postmark. So if you wait till the last minute and you drop off your mail ballot inside one of these collection boxes on election day, but the pickup time for that is, let's say, 5 o'clock, and you drop it off at 8 o'clock, that's not going to get postmarked until the following day, right? So that's why I was giving the recommendation to do so well in advance of election day. But if you're going to wait until election day to drop it off, then you might as well drop it off at any one of our mail ballot drop-off locations or any one of our 235 super polling locations the day of, just to make sure that it's within our possession, because you don't need to worry about a postmark. But that's generally what the U.S. Postal Service means by postmarked is that they're canceling out the postage, and by doing so, they're putting a date on it.
Gotcha. I think that's a great distinction. And I think you said October 27th is that day recommended date.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so I figured it out. I had accidentally opened the YouTube, so I was streaming the YouTube while I was in the Zoom, so it was kind of looping off of itself because there is a delay on the YouTube. So for you on the YouTube, we're so sorry about that. We've just figured it out. So we will try this a second time. Okay. Now, let's make sure that I'm sharing my computer sound. Let's try this again.
Hi, I'm Charles.
I'm Grace.
I'm Mary.
I'm Marianne.
We're interns with Rock the Vote, and we're here to talk about the importance of voting.
The importance of voting.
The importance of voting.
The importance of voting.
Now, this is a huge topic, but it's so necessary. We hope you can stick with us for the rest of this video as we discuss why voting matters.
The United States was founded with the intention of being a revolutionary state based in liberty and justice for all. This included the idea of being a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. In short, a democracy, where the supreme power is held by the people and exercised directly by the people or the representatives that they elect. The key to executing this idea is a good relationship between the government and the people that elected them.
But this is a reality we have never truly realized. To this day, millions of Americans do not engage in a relationship with their government. In recent elections, voter turnout has been around 60% for general elections and 45% for midterms. But voting is our chance to shape the representative democracy that we claim to have.
In fact, our government is not very representative. We're filming this video in September of 2020, and currently, with only 26 women and 11 people of color, our Senate is older and significantly less diverse than our voting population. Out of the House of Representatives' 435 members, only 105 are women, with 54 Black, 46 Latinx, 14 Asian American Pacific Islanders, and only 4 Native American representatives. Our state governments aren't much better. Low voter participation leads to our governments not really being of or by the people. So how can it function for the people?
In order to change this, we have to create a culture that supports voter participation and civic education. Now, this doesn't just mean making sure people come out to vote in presidential elections, but instead ensuring that they know who has the power to make change in their own communities. Local races are the most often overlooked, but they can have the biggest impact on our everyday lives. District attorneys and sheriffs have the power to decide how the law is enforced, and they can have the biggest impact on our criminal justice system. Even judges are elected in some states.
However, in these local races, it's older people that turn out to vote. On average, the age of people deciding these vital races is 60. If younger people truly want to harness their political power, they need to show up and vote down ballot.
And as young people, we have a significant electoral power. Millennials and Gen Z make up nearly 40% of eligible voters, meaning we can determine the direction of our country and our communities. Look, it's up to us to register to vote and cast our ballots so we can fully realize the power of our generation and the potential of our democracy.
But we know what you might be thinking. Right now, amid the COVID-19 pandemic and economic downturn in our nation's largest racial reckoning since the civil rights movement of the 1960s, it might feel like voting isn't enough. You might feel like you have a responsibility to do more in addition to making your voice heard at the ballot box.
One consequence of the pandemic has been a serious poll workers shortage. As the majority of poll workers are over the age of 60, an age group particularly vulnerable to COVID-19. This has led to the closing of polling places, making it even more difficult for voters to vote in person.
It is vital that people who are able to will go and work at the polls on Election Day and address this shortage. And hey, in most states and localities, poll workers receive a pretty generous stipend, so you can get paid to protect our democracy.
If you can't commit to being a poll worker, one of the best things you can do is engage in relational organizing. This means talking to people you know one-on-one about voting. Register your family and friends to vote, and if they're already registered, make sure they have a plan to vote. This individualized approach to civic engagement is a great way to increase voter turnout.
How exactly you can vote depends largely on your state and locality. So if you head to rockthevote.org, we can help you out with the specifics.
Generally, voters have 3 options.
You can vote early in person, which is sometimes referred to as in-person absentee voting.
You can vote by mail, sometimes referred to as a mail-in absentee ballot.
Or you can vote in person on Election Day.
However you choose to vote, in 49 of the 50 states, you must be registered. Many states have voter registration deadlines in October, so we recommend you head to rockthevote.org to register or check your registration status as soon as possible to ensure that you will be eligible to vote in November.
This election is particularly important because of its uniqueness. We have never seen such rapid changes in voting policy and have never had to utilize alternative voting options on this scale. It is more important than ever to hold your leaders accountable and protect our right to vote.
Our country is also in a fragile state. We are on the brink of another recession, and the leadership elected in November will be responsible for getting us through the pandemic and its aftermath. Participation is vital to ensure that our democracy remains strong through this crisis.
This election is a general election, which happens every 4 years. This includes the presidential race, as well as elections for all 435 members of the House of Representatives and 35 Senate seats. There will also be several state and local elections, including 13 gubernatorial races.
This November, the future of our democracy is on the ballot.
As young people, we have the power to decide this election.
Are you with us?
For more information, head to rockthevote.org or text VOTER to 788-683.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Rock the Vote and your interns for doing this. This really has provided so much insight to so many people. So we're looking at the time right now, and it's actually 7:35. So we are going to try and wrap this up in the next 10 minutes or so. So we have 2 more questions, and then we're just going to close out. So Natalie, do you want to go through the last 2 questions real quick?
Yes, so another question we have is from Colin O'Malley. He's from San Diego. And his question is, what are some of the details about prop talks and what is the frequency and time range of them?
Oh my goodness, I am so happy you asked this question. So prop talks, right now we are in the throes of prop talk season. I am doing one just about every other day. Depending on what part of San Diego you're in, you might want to check in with either League of Women Voters San Diego, which deals with San Diego proper, or League of Women Voters North County San Diego, which loops in all of us up in Carlsbad, Encinitas, Solana Beach, Vista, Escondido, Oceanside, that whole happy family up north. So I would really recommend you check out either of those. If you Google League of Women Voters San Diego or North County San Diego, it'll take you to mylwv.org, or check us out at LWVSD or LWVNCSD for North County. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, we'll have those dates. You can also check, we partner with a lot of local churches, other organizing groups. So, you know, if there's a community center, a community institution that you are a part of, that's wonderful, and check in with them because they might have a specific partnered event coming up.
Thank you so much, Meg, for sharing all your resources. I hope that everyone out there will go and check them out because they spent a lot of time working on them. So thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm. And then Meg, just to follow up on that, when we had invited you to this roundtable discussion, so you had mentioned something about an initiative that League of Women Voters San Diego is doing, a bunch of actions that someone can take until Election Day. Can you give us just a little bit more information?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to share. So it's called 101 Days of Action, and you can find that on our Facebook and our Instagram primarily. I think it's also on our Twitter, again, at LWVSD. And those are every day a different action you can take to educate yourself, engage others, and generally prepare for this upcoming election. Those activities range from looking up, you know, who are your specific representatives. That video absolutely importantly referenced down ballot races. A lot of attention gets put on the national race, fairly so, but it's a lot of those local officials, a judge, a county supervisor, a school board that may impact you more directly. So we link all sorts of different local resources to help people understand, you know, the full playing field. And again, we hope all of these, a lot of times, you know, an election season can bring a lot of anxiety. You think about having to do research, you think, I don't know, I think of like a Harry Potter style library, people in silly hats and glasses. It can all feel like a lot and sometimes a little intimidating. And all of these different initiatives, especially the ones coming out of our youth empowerment committee, they're all youth curated, and they hope to take this whole situation, make it a little bit less intimidating, to help you, you know, harness the power of your voice and make the changes you want to see in our community. So 101 Days of Action, check it out.
Awesome, thank you so much, Meg. And then Michael, we have a question from Joya Saxena from Oakland, California, but I believe she's a registered voter in San Diego. So I know if she isn't a registered voter in San Diego, this is a hard question for you to answer, but assuming she is a registered voter in San Diego and she's just off for college, her question is, when is the last day mail-in ballots arrive? It's been 3 days and I haven't received mine.
Oh, what we're if you're a San Diegan, what we're recommending to San Diegans that are registered to vote is to expect it no later than October 14th. As I mentioned before, is I have not received my mail ballot yet, and I actually checked my U.S. Postal Service informed delivery today, and I know that a friend of mine that I just recently met on a camping trip for the very first time, happened to be a San Diegan, that we met up in Mammoth. Her husband had not received his mail ballot, although she did and her son did, and my wife and my son received their respective mail ballots, but I did not. So we're kind of in this boat where we hadn't seen it, but it came today, or I expect it today. I haven't been able to check it physically, but I know that the U.S. Postal Service sent me an email showing me that the mail ballot should be delivered today as well. But again, we want voters to know that it does take time to deliver ballots, and generally we ask voters to wait until all the way up until October 14th. So this time next week, or actually the day before, Wednesday this following week, this upcoming Wednesday, to see whether or not they have their mail ballot in their mailbox. And if not, then at that point in time, to contact our office, and we'd be more than happy to suspend the ballot, because again, we're tracking every single one, and then reissue that ballot to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So just again, I'd like to extend our thanks from the March for Our Lives San Diego community, the March for Our Lives California community, and the March for Our Lives national community for coming and speaking to us for this event. And then this has really been enlightening for all of us, for Natalie, I, and Meg also, I believe. And thank you, Michael. Thank you, Meg, for speaking. And thank you to all of the viewers right now who stuck with us the whole time through our technical difficulties to watch this. We know that you guys have other things to get through. We know that I think there's some sort of baseball game going on right now that you guys need to get back to. And then I know also that there was a mayoral debate today that you guys should go catch up on to learn more about your candidates. So that is another thing. Debates, those are really good resources, these debates and town halls, especially on the local level, where you can learn more about your candidates. So just a reminder for everyone, make sure to go to MFOLSD, so that's March for Our Lives San Diego.com/vote to register to vote, to pre-register to vote. And then the vote.mfolsd.com link that you're using to view this soon will be turned into a voting resource network. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully by tomorrow or the day after, we'll have that set up and we'll have all of these resources to provide. So thank you so much for watching, and we hope you have a nice day. Great.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Chris.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Chris.
Take care.